The email arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was wrapping up my quarterly budget analysis for the marketing department. My name is Brenna, and I'd been working as a financial analyst at Meridian Solutions for almost 3 years. The subject line made me do a double take. Strategic Planning Meeting, Thursday 2 p.m., Conference Room A. I stared at the sender's name. Richard Caldwell, Senior Vice President of Operations. In my entire time at Meridian, I'd maybe exchanged 5 words with the man. He was one of those executives who seemed to float above the rest of us, appearing only in company-wide presentations and corner office meetings that were way above my pay grade. The email was brief. Brenna, please attend the attached meeting to provide administrative support and documentation. Bring your laptop for note-taking. RC. Administrative support. Note-taking. The words stung a little, if I'm being honest. I had a master's degree in finance from Northwestern, 3 years of solid performance reviews, and I'd just finished streamlining our department's expense tracking system, saving the company roughly $200,000 annually. But to Richard Caldwell, I was apparently just someone to take notes. I forwarded the email to my supervisor, Janet, with a quick, FYI, got pulled into this meeting, not sure why. Her response came back within minutes. Wow, the big leagues. Play nice and maybe they'll remember you exist. Janet meant well, but her comment highlighted something I'd been feeling for months. Despite my contributions, I felt invisible at Meridian. I watched less qualified colleagues get promoted while I remained stuck in the same role, handling increasingly complex projects that somehow never translated into career advancement. The rest of Tuesday and all of Wednesday passed in a blur of speculation. I asked around discreetly, trying to figure out what this meeting was about. The only information I could gather was that it involved the Preston Industries account, our biggest client, representing about 30% of Meridian's annual revenue. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that matched my mood. I dressed carefully, choosing my best navy blazer and making sure my laptop was fully charged. As I walked through the halls toward Conference Room A, I noticed the usual suspects heading in the same direction. Richard Caldwell, obviously, along with Michael Torres from Strategic Planning, Sarah Chen from Client Relations, and David Hammond from IT Infrastructure. These were the heavy hitters, the decision-makers, the people whose opinions shaped company policy. And then there was me, apparently invited to document their brilliance. Conference Room A was Meridian's most impressive meeting space, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay and a massive mahogany table that could seat 20 people. When I arrived, the others were already settling in, their laptops open and coffee cups steaming. Richard gestured to a chair near the end of the table. Brenna, thanks for coming. We'll need comprehensive notes today, so make sure you capture everything. This is a critical situation. I nodded, opened my laptop, and positioned myself to take notes. But as I settled in, I couldn't help but notice the tension in the room. Sarah kept glancing at her phone, Michael was drumming his fingers on the table, and David looked like he hadn't slept in days. All right, let's get started, Richard said, his voice carrying the weight of someone delivering bad news. As you all know, Preston Industries has been our anchor client for 5 years. Yesterday, I received a call from their CEO, James Preston himself. They're having serious doubts about renewing their contract. The room fell silent, except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. I kept typing, but my mind was racing. Preston Industries wasn't just any client. Losing them would be devastating for Meridian. What's the specific issue? Sarah asked, her voice tight. Performance metrics, Richard replied, sliding a folder across the table. They're saying our quarterly efficiency reports don't align with their internal measurements. They think we're either incompetent or deliberately misleading them. Either way, they want answers by Monday, or they're taking their business elsewhere. I watched as the folder made its way around the table. When it reached me, I almost passed it on automatically. After all, I was just here to take notes. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The documents inside were familiar. I'd seen similar reports dozens of times in my work, but as I scanned the numbers, something felt off. The data presentation was clean and professional, but there were inconsistencies in the methodology that made my analyst brain itch. "We've been working on this for 3 weeks," Michael said, frustration evident in his voice. "Our numbers are solid. We've double-checked everything." "Triple-checked," David added. "The data is accurate. I don't know what Preston's people are seeing that we're not." I continued reading while they talked, my fingers automatically typing their conversation. But part of my attention was focused on the reports, and the more I read, the more certain I became that I knew exactly what the problem was. The meeting continued for another hour, with each department head presenting their analysis of the Preston situation. I diligently took notes, occasionally glancing up to see the frustration mounting on everyone's faces. They were smart people, accomplished professionals, but they seemed to be missing something fundamental. Sarah presented the client relations perspective. "Preston's team has been increasingly critical over the past 6 months. They've questioned our response times, our reporting accuracy, and our overall value proposition. I've tried to address their concerns, but they keep pointing to these discrepancies in our efficiency metrics." Michael jumped in with his strategic analysis. "The issue isn't our performance, it's their expectations. They're comparing apples to oranges. Our methodology is industry standard, but they're applying their internal manufacturing metrics to our service delivery model." David nodded vigorously. "Exactly. We're measuring different things. They track widget production. We track service completion. The frameworks are completely different." Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "I understand the logic, but logic doesn't keep clients happy. Preston Industries generates $12 million in annual revenue for us. If we lose them, we're looking at potential layoffs." The weight of his words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. I kept typing, but my mind was working through the problem from a different angle. As a financial analyst, I'd spent years learning to spot discrepancies and inconsistencies in data, and what I was seeing in the Preston reports was a classic case of measurement alignment issues. "What if we completely restructure our reporting methodology?" Sarah suggested. "Maybe we can create hybrid metrics that bridge the gap between their expectations and our capabilities." "That would take months to implement," Michael replied. "We don't have months. We have until Monday." "Could we bring in external consultants?" David asked. "Someone with experience in manufacturing efficiency metrics?" Richard shook his head. "No time, and frankly, we can't afford to look like we need outside help to manage our biggest client." I watched this exchange while continuing to review the documents. The answer was right there in the data, but they were all looking at it from their specialized perspectives. Sarah saw it as a relationship problem, Michael as a strategic alignment issue, David as a technical challenge. But from my financial analysis background, I could see the real issue. They were measuring the right things, but reporting them in the wrong context. "What about historical benchmarking?" Michael suggested. "We could show them how our performance has improved over time, even if the absolute numbers don't match their expectations." "We've tried that," Sarah said. "They want to see efficiency gains, not just historical improvement. They want to know how we compare to their internal operations." As they continued brainstorming, I found myself mentally drafting a solution. The problem wasn't with Meridian's performance or Preston's expectations. It was with the translation between two different measurement systems. In my previous role at a consulting firm, I'd worked on similar alignment issues between client and vendor metrics. The key was creating a conversion framework that could accurately translate Meridian's service delivery metrics into Preston's manufacturing efficiency language. It would require adjusting for industry variables, operational differences, and productivity baselines, but it was absolutely doable. I paused in my note-taking, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Should I say something? I was supposed to be documenting, not contributing. But as I looked around the table at these increasingly frustrated executives, I realized that my outside perspective might be exactly what they needed. "We're running out of options," Richard said, his voice heavy with resignation. "Unless someone has a brilliant idea in the next few minutes, we're going to have to call Preston and ask for an extension, which won't look good." I took a deep breath. This was my moment. I could either continue being invisible, or I could speak up and potentially help solve a problem that could affect the entire company. Actually, I said, my voice quieter than intended, I think I might have an idea. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me, and I felt a familiar flutter of nerves in my stomach. Richard looked surprised, as if he'd forgotten I was there. I'm sorry, Brenna, but we really need to focus on solutions right now. Can you make sure you're capturing all of this discussion accurately? The dismissal stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. I looked down at my laptop screen, then back up at the group. I understand, but I think the solution might be simpler than we're making it. The problem isn't with our performance or their expectations. It's with the translation between measurement systems. Michael frowned. What do you mean, translation? I could feel Richard's impatience, but I pressed on. Preston Industries uses manufacturing efficiency metrics, units per hour, defect rates, throughput optimization. We use service delivery metrics, completion times, client satisfaction scores, project milestones. They're both valid, but they're measuring different things. We know that, Sarah said, not unkindly. But we can't change how they measure success. We don't need to change how they measure success, I replied, my confidence growing. We need to show them how our metrics translate to their metrics. It's like converting currencies. The value is the same, but the denomination is different. The room remained quiet as I continued explaining my idea. I could see skepticism on some faces, curiosity on others. Richard was checking his watch, clearly wanting to move on, but Michael leaned forward with interest. Can you be more specific? Michael asked. What would this translation look like in practice? I opened the Preston folder again, pulling up the specific reports that had caught my attention. Look at this efficiency metric they're questioning. They're seeing a 73% efficiency rating from us, but their internal operations run at 89%. They think we're underperforming, but we're actually measuring completely different things. I turned my laptop screen toward the group, showing the spreadsheet I'd been mentally building. Their 89% measures widgets produced per hour compared to theoretical maximum. Our 73% measures service delivery completion compared to projected timelines. If we adjust for industry variables, operational scope, and baseline complexity, our 73% actually translates to roughly 94% in their measurement system. David blinked. Wait, how did you calculate that? Cross-industry productivity benchmarking, I explained. I worked on similar conversions at my previous job. Manufacturing productivity and service delivery productivity use different baseline assumptions. When you normalize for industry standards, project complexity, and resource allocation, the numbers tell a completely different story. Sarah looked intrigued. So you're saying we're actually performing better than they thought? Significantly better, I confirmed. But more importantly, we can create a reporting framework that shows them exactly how our metrics translate to their preferred measurement system. They'll be able to see our performance in terms they understand and trust. Richard finally looked up from his watch. This is an interesting theory, Brenna, but we need concrete solutions, not academic exercises. I felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but this time, I was ready for it. I can have a complete conversion framework and revised reports ready by tomorrow morning. If you give me access to the full Preston dataset and our historical performance metrics, I can create a comprehensive translation that addresses every concern they've raised. The room erupted in overlapping conversations. Michael was asking technical questions about the conversion methodology. Sarah wanted to know how this would affect client communications. David was concerned about implementation timelines, but Richard held up his hand for silence. Brenna, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is a complex strategic issue. We need proven solutions, not experimental approaches. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was 3 years of being overlooked. Maybe it was the frustration of watching talented people struggle with a problem I could solve. Or maybe it was just the realization that I had nothing left to lose. With respect, sir, your proven approaches haven't worked. You've been struggling with this for 3 weeks, and you're no closer to a solution than when you started. I'm offering to solve the problem in one night, using established financial analysis techniques that I've successfully applied before. The room fell dead silent. I could feel my heart pounding, but I kept going. I know you see me as just the note taker, but I'm a financial analyst with 3 years of experience at this company and 5 years of experience in cross-industry metric analysis. I've saved this company money, I've improved our processes, and I've consistently delivered results. And right now, I'm offering to save our biggest client relationship. Richard's expression was unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might ask me to leave. But then Michael spoke up. Richard, what if we let her try? Worst case scenario, we're exactly where we are now. Best case, we solve the Preston problem and save $12 million in annual revenue. I agree, Sarah added. If Brenna thinks she can create a viable conversion framework overnight, we should let her try. The traditional approaches aren't working. David nodded. The risk is minimal, and the potential upside is enormous. Richard looked around the table, then back at me. You really think you can solve this? I don't think I can solve it, I replied. I know I can solve it. Give me until tomorrow morning, and I'll have a complete solution that addresses every concern Preston has raised. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Finally, he nodded. All right. You have until 8 a.m. tomorrow. I'll give you access to everything you need. But Brenna, if this doesn't work, if you can't deliver what you're promising, it's going to reflect poorly on your judgment and your future at this company. I met his gaze steadily. Understood. But when this works, I want to be recognized for the contribution. No more invisible analyst. No more just taking notes. I want to be part of the solution going forward. Richard raised an eyebrow at my directness, but he nodded. Fair enough. If you solve the Preston problem, we'll discuss your role in the company's strategic initiatives. As the meeting broke up, I felt a mixture of excitement and terror. I'd just committed to solving in one night a problem that had stumped senior executives for 3 weeks. But for the first time in my career at Meridian, I felt like I was being seen as more than just a background figure. Michael approached me as I was packing up my laptop. Brenna, I want you to know that I think you're onto something. The cross-industry metric conversion makes sense. If you need any support tonight, call me. Sarah nodded in agreement. Same here. I can provide context on Preston's specific concerns and communication preferences. Even David, who'd been the most skeptical, offered his help. If you run into any technical issues with the data analysis, I'm available. As I walked back to my office, I realized that something fundamental had shifted. Whether I succeeded or failed, I'd finally stepped out of the shadows and claimed my place at the table. Now I just had to prove that I deserved to be there. I stayed at the office until nearly midnight, poring over 5 years of Preston Industries data and cross-referencing it with industry benchmarks I'd accumulated over my career. The conversion framework was more complex than I'd initially thought, but my confidence in the solution only grew stronger as I dug deeper into the numbers. The problem was exactly what I'd suspected. Preston was comparing manufacturing efficiency metrics to service delivery metrics, without accounting for fundamental differences in operational structure. It was like comparing a sports car's horsepower to a freight train's cargo capacity. Both were valid measures of performance, but they served completely different purposes. I created a comprehensive conversion matrix that adjusted for industry variables, project complexity, resource allocation, and baseline productivity standards. When I applied this framework to Meridian's performance data, the results were striking. Not only were we meeting Preston's efficiency expectations, we were exceeding them by a significant margin. By 6 a.m., I had a complete presentation ready: the conversion framework, revised performance reports, historical trend analysis, and recommendations for ongoing metric alignment. I'd also prepared a detailed explanation of the methodology that would satisfy both Preston's technical team and their executive leadership. I arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m., printed the presentation materials, and set up conference room A for the morning briefing. Richard arrived precisely at 8 a.m., followed by Michael, Sarah, and David. They all looked like they'd had a sleepless night, which made me feel slightly better about my own exhaustion. All right, Brenna, Richard said, settling into his chair. Show us what you've got. I took a deep breath and began my presentation. I walked them through the conversion framework, explaining how manufacturing efficiency metrics could be accurately translated to service delivery metrics. I showed them the revised performance reports, highlighting how Meridian's actual performance compared to Preston's expectations when properly aligned. The room was completely silent as I presented the data. I could see understanding dawn on their faces as the pieces fell into place. When I finished, David was the first to speak. "This is brilliant. The conversion factors account for everything: industry standards, operational complexity, resource allocation. It's mathematically sound and practically applicable." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "The historical trend analysis is particularly compelling. When you apply the conversion framework to our 5-year performance data, it shows consistent improvement and strong competitive positioning." Sarah was reviewing the client communication strategy I'd included. "This addresses every concern Preston raised. The metric alignment explanations are clear, the performance comparisons are favorable, and the ongoing reporting framework will prevent future misunderstandings." Richard had been quietly reviewing the materials during the discussion. Finally, he looked up at me. "This is exactly what we needed. The analysis is thorough, the solution is practical, and the presentation is professional." "How confident are you in these conversions?" "Completely confident," I replied. "I've triple-checked the methodology and validated the conversion factors against industry standards. The math is solid, and the approach is proven." He nodded slowly. "Then we're calling Preston this morning. Sarah, can you set up a meeting for this afternoon? We're going to present this solution and hopefully save our biggest client relationship." As everyone prepared to leave, Richard asked me to stay behind. My heart rate spiked. Was he going to criticize something about my work? "Brenna," he said once we were alone, "I owe you an apology. I brought you into that meeting yesterday expecting you to just document our discussion. I underestimated your capabilities and your potential contribution to solving this problem." I felt a wave of relief mixed with vindication. "Thank you for saying that. But more importantly," he continued, "I want to discuss your future at this company. The analysis you've produced demonstrates strategic thinking, technical competence, and practical problem-solving skills. Those are exactly the qualities we need in our senior analyst positions." My heart skipped. Senior analyst positions? We've been looking for someone to lead our client metrics and performance analysis team. It's a significant promotion. Senior analyst level, substantial salary increase, and direct involvement in strategic client relationships. After what you've demonstrated, I think you're the ideal candidate. I stared at him, hardly believing what I was hearing. Yes, absolutely yes. I'm very interested in that opportunity." "Good. We'll discuss the details after we resolve the Preston situation. But assuming today's presentation goes well, I want to move forward with your promotion immediately." The Preston meeting that afternoon went better than anyone had dared hope. When I presented the conversion framework and revised performance metrics, their technical team was immediately convinced. The CEO, James Preston himself, was impressed with the thoroughness of the analysis and the practical application of the solution. "This is exactly what we needed," he told Richard. "We knew Meridian was performing well, but we couldn't reconcile the metrics. This framework gives us the visibility and confidence we need to continue our partnership." Not only did Preston Industries renew their contract, but they increased their engagement by 20%, citing the improved metric alignment and reporting framework as key factors in their decision. 3 weeks later, I was officially promoted to Senior Analyst, Client Metrics and Performance Analysis. My new role involved working directly with major clients to ensure metric alignment and performance optimization. I had my own office, a team of junior analysts, and a seat at the strategic planning table. Looking back, that Thursday afternoon meeting was the turning point in my career. I'd spent 3 years being invisible, taking notes, and hoping someone would notice my contributions. But when I finally spoke up, when I finally claimed my place at the table, everything changed. The lesson I learned wasn't just about having confidence in my abilities. It was about the importance of seizing opportunities when they present themselves. Richard hadn't invited me to that meeting to contribute solutions. He'd invited me to take notes. But I chose to see beyond the limitations of that role and offer value where I could. Sometimes being underestimated is actually an advantage. While the senior executives were locked into their specialized perspectives, I was free to see the problem from a different angle. My position as an outsider gave me the fresh perspective they needed to find a solution. Now, whenever I'm in meetings with junior staff members, I make sure to ask for their input. Some of the best ideas come from unexpected sources, and I never want to overlook someone's potential contribution just because they're not in a senior role. That meeting taught me that visibility isn't just about being seen, it's about being valuable. Once I demonstrated my value, the visibility followed naturally. And more importantly, I learned that sometimes the best way to get a seat at the table is to prove that you deserve to be there. The Preston Industries solution became a template for how we approach client metric alignment across all our major accounts. It's been implemented successfully with dozens of clients, generating millions in additional revenue and preventing countless potential contract disputes. But for me, the real victory wasn't the promotion or the recognition. It was the moment I stopped being invisible and started being indispensable. That's a lesson that's shaped every aspect of my career since then, and it's one I carry with me every day. Sometimes the most important meetings are the ones where you're just supposed to take notes. But if you're prepared, if you're paying attention, and if you're willing to speak up when it matters, you might just solve the problem that everyone else has been struggling with. That's exactly what happened to me, and it changed everything.